Hello, hello, hello. We'll get started in just a minute. I'm waiting on social media to let you know that I'm on. I think I have everything set up. We are on week 2 of doing our midday lives where we tackle hard topics with simple solutions. So if you're in here already, hi Instagram, I have you all set up. Hi Facebook, I have everything all set up. If you are in here, please hit that share button, share with someone, let them know that we are live and we are switching. We're not switching topics that drastically, but we are talking about mental health this week, because it's mental health awareness. May is mental health awareness. So happy May. We are in May, y'all. We're like almost 6 months in, which is half a year into the year. And I'm like, where did the time go? It was just January last week. Why it's May already? But we are here, and May is Mental Health Awareness Week month, and so we're going to be talking about some topics specifically related to mental health. Although all of it's related to mental health, we'll specifically dive into some topics related to mental health. And this week, we're talking about the relationship between mental health and relationship, or mental illness and relationship. So tag somebody, let them know that we're in here. Hit the share button if you're in. I'm still checking my stuff over here. Make sure Facebook has got all my stuff up and running correctly. If you are in here, please let me know if you can see me, if you can hear me good, because I want to make sure that we are being heard. So let me check here. How was y'all's weekend? I had a busy weekend. I got a story to tell you too, so make sure you stick around. Like if you see the bags up under my eyes, it's for like I got a story. Like if you are my friend on Facebook, then you probably already know about my story of why it looks like I got bags up under my eyes. But yesterday, y'all know I have a 3-year-old, right? So I have a 3-year-old who was like on 10 yesterday. I don't know what was going on. I don't know whether he was just extremely excited about the fact that it was a new month, even though he didn't really know or care that it was a new month, or I don't know what was going on. But somewhere around 6 o'clock, he passed out, right? Go to sleep. I'm like, okay, let him sleep, because we'd had a pretty challenging day with him all day, and we decided to let him sleep. Well, he slept all the way until like 4 ish that morning, and woke up. And of course, my husband is asleep, so I'm up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning with this little person, eating spaghetti at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so, if you see bags up under my eyes, it's just evidence that I'm a parent, and that I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning doing my job as a mother. And so if my voice sounded a little groggy, or if I'm maybe a little behind today, it's because I'm still trying to get I've done got too old to do the late night early mornings. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Like I'm just about at that age to where it's like a whole struggle for me to pull it together. Pull it together like I used to when I was in college, and I can, when you pull them all nighters and get up the next day and stay up all night again. Yeah, I can't do that. Yeah, it's difficult to do that now. Although I'm still late nighter, but I'm not like a 4 or 5 o'clock late nighter. But yeah, so he went back to sleep around 5:30, 6 o'clock, and had to get up and go to school. So y'all, y'all, if you understand, then you get. If you know what they say, if you know, you know. So today, enough about me. Today we are talking about the topic of mental health versus mental illness, because I think a lot of times some people get those mixed up. And if you were here in the beginning, then you heard my spiel about, May being Mental Health Awareness Week. And when actually it's Mental Health Awareness Month. I keep saying week, but it's month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. And the whole goal of what we do here is to destigmatize mental health and what mental health looks like on a day-to-day basis and in your life, and how you can adjust, and what relationships should look like. Like we try to do our part in destigmatizing mental health and making it normal for you to go seek help when you know that there's some things going on. But what we're seeing, especially for certain communities, not to leave anyone out, is that mental health is still a stigma, and people are not getting, even though the resources are there, people are not seeking out those resources like they need to. And even if they do seek out the resources, they don't necessarily know what to look for when they're looking for a therapist, or they don't necessarily know, hey, you can fire your therapist if they're not a good fit. People don't know these things. And so it's up for us, the people in the mental health community, to stand up and actually teach about certain topics, so it becomes a norm for people to go seek help. It becomes a norm for you to take your children to therapy, or for you to go to therapy with them, or it just becomes a norm. And then once it becomes a norm, a part of our cultures, then we pass that along to our children, and then it's not a problem for our children to go seek out help when they know they're struggling in a certain area. So do your part. One way you can do your part in helping provide or helping to further the message is by, when you see these things, like, if I'm live, or if you see other therapists or other counselors or coaches who are talking about certain topics, go live or share certain things that really resonate with you, and will resonate with the people that follow you, or that you care about, your family, your friends. Then share it. Feel free to share it. Tag them in, because we want a world where mental health becomes just as normal as medical health. That's the word and actually they both fit together. They Okay, so I'm getting into my message. So I want to start off a little bit. I want to start off by telling you who I am. My name is Dr. Tiffany. I always miss that. I just feel like, like, oh, okay, people just know, but people don't know. Let me tell you who I am. My name is Dr. Tiffany, and I am a therapist. I'm a trained, master's level therapist, and I also work as a relationship expert. I go under the title of relationship expert, and I provide coaching and consulting services. Our coaching services are specifically for women who are going through or healing and recovering from traumatic relationships, or relational trauma is what we talk about. So that's divorce, breakup, that's grief, or anything that you're going through that you just kind of find like it's hard to get through it, or you just need that extra support. Then our coaching services is designed for that. And then we have our consulting, where we specifically work with businesses, particularly small businesses, and help bridge that gap between mental health and business, because most small businesses don't have large EAP services, or they may not have the workshops and the trainings on mental health. But that's what our consulting services do. That's what our firm agency does, is that we provide those services, workshops and trainings for small businesses who may not have the funds to be able to do to provide the resources like most larger companies. So again, if you're in here, please hit that share. And let's start here. Y'all, I told you, I'm gonna slow down, because once I get going, I'm like this. Let's start here with defining what exactly mental health is. So we're talking about mental health versus mental illness and the relationship between the two. Mental health, according to the mentalhealth.gov, I think is the website that defines this, is that mental health includes our emotional, our psychological, and our social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, how we act. It also determines how we handle stress, how we relate to others, how we relate to our life circumstances, how we recover from life circumstances, how we cope, how we deal with life, how we deal with other people. Like, all of that is our mental health. You don't have to have a mental illness or be diagnosed with a mental illness to pay attention to your mental health. Your mental health is just your mental well-being. How do you cope with daily life things as they come at you? How do you take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed or when you're stressed or when you had a long day? Or like me, when you with your children and up at 5 o'clock in the morning wanting to eat some spaghetti. Like, how do you cope with all of that? How do you interact with people? How are you socially? Do you isolate from people, or are you able to interact with people? Even if you are introverted, are you still able to interact with people? Or do you struggle? Is that so your social life, is that a struggle for you? Or your relational life? Like, is it a struggle for you to have relationships with other people? Are all of your relationships up in arm? All of this is included in your mental health. It is how you think, how you feel, or how you act, how you interact with other people. But when we talk about mental illness is defined as a condition that involves changes in your emotion, in your thinking, and in your behavior, or a combination of all of those. It could be changes in your emotion, thinking, or behavior, and usually it does. Like, usually when you have some sort of mental illness, it impacts all three of those. It impacts your emotions, it impacts how you think, and it impacts how you behave. It impacts your relationships. It impacts various things in your life. It impacts your whole life. Mental illness are usually associated with some kind of distress. Now, some of that is genetic. Mental illness can be genetic. Some, it can be passed down. Some of it's behavior. It could be something that you learn from a family member or from how you grew up and how you deal with certain things. It could come from that, or it can actually come from having some kind of trauma or some kind of experience that really impacts your life. But I was looking up statistics as I was preparing for this, and the statistics show that almost 50 million or over 50 million people have a diagnosed mental health condition, mental illness condition. And when I say mental illness, I'm talking about a diagnosis such as depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. Like, those are what are characterized as mental illness. But remember, mental health is how you take care of or how you deal with or cope with certain things or stressors that happen in your life. So it also includes how you take care of mental illness. And so the relationship between the two is, if you're not aware that you have some mental illness going on, chances are you're not doing a very good job at taking care of your mental health. And your mental illness is suffering because you're not taking care of your mental health, or because you have not done a good job of really taking care of your mental health. Well, now you may see some mental illness developing. And the way I think of this is grief, because I myself am still grieving, still going through the grieving process of the loss of my mother. Is that if I don't take that time, those moments when I'm thinking about my mother, or when I'm really missing her, or when I just want to sit down and I just want to cry and I'm looking at her picture, I'm looking at something that reminds me of something she said or something that she did, if I don't take the moments to really allow myself time to just really cry or really miss her, or to honor who she is, like now when I'm just talking about it, if I don't take those moments, then depression could form. And what we see a lot of times with people is that they don't take those moments of really paying attention to, I really am stressed out. So, but I'm going to keep working. And if you keep working over being stressed out, then some other things are going to form. And next thing you know, you may be struggling with anxiety, and where did this come from? Where did this come from? Or you may have had something happen to you, and you have some inside resentment or unexpressed emotions that you just kind of keep bottled up, and now you're trying to figure out, well, why am I struggling with depression? And it's not that linear, it's just some examples. These are some examples that I'm using. But we have to stop and pay attention to our mental health, our mental well-being, and how we're coping and dealing with life. Because if we don't stop and pay attention to those things, they actually get worse. They actually can form into all kinds of other things. And even trauma, because some of the mental illness that we're diagnosed with may not be because I didn't stop and pay attention. It may be because somebody else in another generation didn't stop and pay attention. And now some things are just passed down, and we call that generational trauma. how you were raised, and some things about and I think I see this one on social media, particularly for African American or Black people, is stop that crying. Boys aren't supposed to cry, and then that's not just specific to a race. You know, I've heard a lot of different races say stuff. Boys aren't supposed to cry. Boys are supposed to express themselves. Boys are supposed to be emotional. I don't know where they get that from. I don't know where they get that from. But when we teach our boys, when we take on these concepts of things that have been taught to us in our past generations, and we pass them along to our children, then our children take them and pass them along to to their children, and now we have generational things, generational experience, and some of that we call generational trauma, just depending on what it is. Especially when you see, and I say this one because I experienced this one myself. Is you see families that where there have been multiple people who have experienced rape, or who have experienced some kind of sexual abuse or domestic violence or addictions, and you see multiple families, like it started in this one generation, and then there's another person in the next generation that has it, and then the generation, and it just kind of passes over. Those are signs, those are things that are being taught in that family system, and usually it takes one person to stand up and say, you know what, this may not have started with me, but this will end with me. I'm not passing along this stuff to my generation. I'm not passing this stuff along to my children. I'm going to get to choose how I want to raise my children, or the behaviors that I want to get to pass to my children. And that's the beauty of when you have these things, you see these things in your family line, or these things even in your own. That's the beauty of mental health, because you're paying attention. But when you see these things, you can say, oh, let me get on that. Let me figure out how I can begin breaking those things in my life, so that they're not passed along to other generations. Which is the beauty of having a therapist or a coach or someone. You need someone. I say you need a therapist. I think everybody needs a therapist. Everybody need to go to I think especially if you have some issues, some trauma, you need to go to someone who's going to give you a very, how do I say this? Not a pastor, because pastors aren't all trained to help work you through some things. And I know that sometimes we say, oh, you know, you got stuff going on, just go to your pastor, just go get prayer, just go. And there's nothing wrong with that. Your spiritual life, all of that plays into your mental health. It plays into it. It helps your mental health. I mean, there's all kind of studies that show that having your spiritual life and meditation and how all of that plays, that helps your mental health, a benefit, your physical life and how you exercise and eat well and all of that plays into your mental well-being. But going back to your spiritual life, and pastors are not trained to do therapy. Not all of them, unless yours is a therapist, and mine is. But he may not serve as your therapist. He may, especially, even therapists has these things about dual roles. They're not supposed to serve in dual roles. So even if he is your pastor and he's a trained therapist, he can't be your therapist. He might say, okay, I can refer you to someone, and he may know what to look for and signs that may be able to say, okay, maybe this is not something spiritual. Maybe this is something, all of it's spiritual actually, but maybe this is not something spiritual. That was a side note, and it takes a lot of more explanation. But maybe this is not something spiritual. This is something that needs to be worked out in therapy. Or maybe we can get this far with this spiritual stuff, and then we can send you somewhere else to help maintain that healing process, or to help further that healing process. And that's where therapy, and that's where having a counselor and all that comes in. And I know that we have not done a good job in America at prioritizing mental health and making it accessible for everyone. We've not done a good job at that. We've not. We need to advocate for that. Because in America, going to see a therapist, you have to pay money. Like if you don't have insurance, you have to pay money. But it's the same thing with medical help. If you don't have insurance, you have to pay money. And somewhere along the line, we got the idea that our medical conditions are more important than our mental conditions. And that ain't true, because our mental conditions can actually mess up a whole lot of generations. A whole lot of people. A whole lot of people can be messed up because your mental capacity is not intact. So there's not, and one is more important than the other. They're both equally important. Okay, that's my rant. That's my rant. But that is how mental health It's not a mental health versus mental illness. It's really not. It's not a versus. They both are relationally, or they both are in relationship with one another. They both play into one another. And I hope I've done a really good job explaining the two. So the topics this week, we'll specifically talk about mental health and relationships and what that look like inside of what mental health looks like in a relationship, and how can you have a relationship and have a mental illness, and if so, then what does that look like? How do you draw boundaries around it? How do you keep from having a codependent relationship with your partner who may have some mental illness, so that you're not caretaking, so that you're not being their parent, but you're being a supportive partner, and what that should look like, or whether or not you're even at a stage where you should be in a relationship, because there's a time especially if you have some severe mental stuff that's going on, that you may not even be able to pour your energy into a relationship. And so what do you do? Like if you're dating someone and you have some depressive symptoms come up, what is that going to look like? How are you going to deal with it? How are you going to cope with it? What do you do? Because if you don't deal with something, especially if you're in relationship with someone and you're not explaining these things and what's going on, your relationship could suffer. Your relationship could suffer or end. It just kind of depends. So we'll talk about that. Some topics we'll talk about is, can a person with mental illness have a relationship? Can mental illness ruin a relationship? Can you get PTSD from a relationship? And these are questions that I've had submitted, like people have asked me before. And so I'll be tackling these topics this week. So join in. And I do have a free resource about 5 myths of difficult relationships. And you can see that at the bottom. If you're on Facebook, you can see that at the bottom. On Instagram, you have to go to my profile and click on my website there, and you will see all the links there. And the 5 myths for difficult relationship guide is our free resource. And we're also offering free discovery calls. And in that discovery call, as some have already taken advantage of that, please make sure that you put a description of what it is that you are looking for. And what that does is help me to be able to prepare, and that helps for you to get the best out of those 30-minute calls. So thank you so much for joining. I didn't get my Facebook, so if you had comments, guys, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't see them. I'll go back and make sure that I watch them so that I can get your comments and comment on your comments. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you bring a friend on tomorrow as we talk about hard topics with simple solutions. I love you so much. Have a good day. Bye.